Okay. Okay. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest speaker today, Greg Bell. So before joining Corelight as their CEO, Greg served in a series of leadership roles up at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. He was the director of the Scientific Networking Division. He was director of the Department of Energy's High Performance Mission Network, also known as ESNet. And he was the chief technology architect in the office of the CIO up at the lab. At ESNet, Greg oversaw the deployment of the world's first 100 gig network at continental scale. UC, if you follow networking, UC campuses have all followed suit in that effort. And he was the first to deploy, really the first in the world, a 400 gig production link, which is amazing if you think about the amount of throughput that provides. Greg and I served together on the Scenic board, so I have a chance to interact with him on a regular basis on there. And he has his PhD from Berkeley and an AB from Harvard. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up Greg Bell to give us a talk about Corelight.
Great. Thank you so much. It's a delight to be here. That was my official bio. And in this talk, I'll share a little bit about the unofficial bio. And I have to say, I've never sat in front of a larger UC emblem. It's amazing. I'm very happy to give this talk to this audience because for most of my career, I was a UC, thank you, IT worker, just like you. And to be honest, I really thought for most of that period of time, about 15 years at LBNL, at Berkeley Lab, that I would always be a UC IT worker. UC was kind of in my blood and in my family's. I went to grad school at Berkeley, worked at the lab for a long time. My daughter, oldest, is a graduate student in molecular and cell biology at Berkeley. My wife for a long time worked in the UC system as an editor at UC Press. And I really thought that would continue indefinitely. And then something unexpected, wonderful, and very challenging happened to me. I'll tell you about that story. But I was thinking back about my transition into UC IT life and remembering that at my very first job, I was an entry-level network engineer, and the tools I needed, let's see, this isn't advancing. So let's see if maybe it's not connected with. There we go, cool. These were the tools I needed for my first UCIT job. And for those of you in the networking specialty in this audience, you'll recognize them. I specifically chose a BIX tool on the right because we use BIX punch downs at LBNL, and I had a toner, and I could wear a t-shirt to work. And I really spent the day understanding the way networking worked from the ground up, from the physical infrastructure, the copper, the optical fiber. At the same time, I was finishing my dissertation at UC Berkeley, and that combination of activities was, I don't know, the yin and the yang of that was perfect for me. And gradually over time, I learned more about networking and rose in the ranks at Berkeley Lab. If I were a NASCAR race car, these would be my logos on the side. So most of my time, that center stripe in the middle has been spent in the University of California system. I have kind of an oddball background as in, most of my education is in humanities, but in the upper left, I spent my early years, my really geeky preteen and teen years as a programmer. So I learned to program when I was quite young in assembly code, so very difficult, sort of close to the metal type of programming. And I think for that reason, computer work, coding, technology had always been demystified for me. And so I was never intimidated by it, but I really wanted to learn about a lot of topics. So I had a humanities undergraduate degree. I spent time working in human rights. I worked for Amnesty International. I ran a small refugee resettlement agency in Tucson when my wife was in grad school. I spent a little time in Hollywood. I've been a career changer. And probably the longest stretch that I've had in a single institution was at the UC, but it was such a great opportunity. It afforded me many chances to learn, to develop leadership skills, and to change roles. The most recent role that I had there was directing the mission network for the Department of Energy, as Tom mentioned, the Energy Sciences Network. Still closely connected with Scenic, and through that wonderful organization, the UC system, and all of its other constituencies. And now, more recently, this latest logo in the lower right, Corelight. Corelight is a company, we think it might be the fastest growing open source software company in history. I'm not sure about that, but we've been doing well. And I'll explain how that is both a true statement and very misleading at the same time, in the sense that it required 20 years of preparation and grit and hard work to really do well. We are commercializing open source software that may be familiar to you. It's called Bro, after Orwell's Big Brother. But because of this sort of regrettable, maybe egregious connotations that Bro has now, the open source community is actually changing the name of the project. We don't know what it'll be. It hasn't been announced yet, but the project's working to change its name. Anyway, we're commercializing the software. It was once mostly popular in the research and education sectors and in some sectors of national defense. But in the last 5 years, it's become really, really popular in enterprises. In fact, it's hard to think of a web scale company that hasn't sort of fallen in love with Bro data and open source Bro. So that's created a commercial opportunity. And I put on the slide here just a press release that Corelight came up with a couple weeks ago, highlighting some of the progress of the last year, record growth. We've grown from about 8 people to 32. We have 7 Fortune 50 customers and I think about 30 overall now. Moved to San Francisco from downtown Berkeley and beginning to serve universities again. We didn't start by serving universities, but now we have a number of university customers actually within the UC system and outside on the West Coast and East. And soon we'll be coming up with a box really designed with Science DMZ in mind, with PRP, maybe I should say, in this community. So beginning to return to our roots in that way. And the question is, how did that happen? If you're following the story of startups, you've seen the outlines of this many times: rapid growth, lots of hiring, and it's important, I think, to demystify the process of how that happens. It's hard work. It takes grit and luck and a lot of determination. It's not easy, but it's incredibly fun. So I thought I would try to give you a sort of impressionistic sense of how this happened for us. I cherish this graph. It looks sort of like a joke, but it is actually deeply true. It comes from an Economist article, Life in a Startup. I don't know if you can read the little labels, but we have an idea. It works. No, it doesn't work. Yes, it does. It's proprietary. No, we have ownership in it. Customers like it. No, they don't. Et cetera. That goes on forever. This graph came from an article published in the mid-'80s by the father of Corelight's chief marketing officer, Alan Saldick, who's a remarkable person, a Berkeley person. He did his undergraduate at UC Berkeley in mechanical engineering, but became a marketing executive. Corelight is his 11th startup, and his 10th, he was VP of marketing for Cloudera. So he's really an expert in what it's like to build a valuable business that's adjacent to an open source project. And he's sort of indicative of the kind of person we're trying to bring into the company to supplement the heritage of the founders, in research and education, open source development. And this graph is true at every time scale for every moment in the startup. It's true every hour, every day, every week, every month, every year, and has been for the 2 or 3 years that I've been involved in one way or another. And it's just maybe the most important thing to know is the emotional roller coaster. You eventually get used to it, and it's probably good for the soul to begin to be equally resilient to, disappointment and signs of success, and just kind of take it all in, average it out, and be consistent and gritty in your response. But just to give you a specific example, like my life this morning, coming here to prepare for the talk. This morning I heard that a major PO, so money into the company that was going to be our largest so far at $1.5 million. Even for a big company, that's a big PO, but for a small company, it's massive, although we've had a couple nearly at that size. It's being delayed and maybe is at severe risk because the company that wanted to buy had a reorganization, a change in accounting rules. We crossed a financial year boundary. And so everything is more complicated than it was just a couple weeks ago, through no fault of our own, really. News like that could be devastating, or it could just be another data point that you work through. And it has to be, if you're going to succeed, if you're going to adapt to the kind of pace that a startup demands, you just have to begin to see it as another data point. Then on my way in, literally on the Lyft ride here, I got a call from Dan Brigatti, who's leading our federal team. He built the federal team for FireEye, and he had fantastic news about a couple of different federal opportunities. And then the co-founder called me right in the lobby at UCOP, telling me about a very large company that's always been a support customer that may want to become a product customer. And that is it in a nutshell. That's what startup life is like. It's up and down and up and down. The large-scale steps, and let me just be a little more specific about what it was like to leave UC and leap into a startup. First, it required widespread commercial adoption of this open source tool. So that has a long history. There was deep, persistent, sort of heroic advocacy at Berkeley Lab for this tool. The tireless investment from the National Science Foundation, some investment from DOE as well. And this long sort of gestation period where Bro was, this well-kept secret, very difficult to get running at scale, a bit of a power tool, but that phase lasted about 15 years. The founders of the company initially didn't start a corporation. They started an LLC to do some services and support around open source Bro, and that's quite a viable way to commercialize an open source product. A lot of companies took that path. They start with services and support, get cash flow positive, and then they pivot to products. The way I got connected, I knew most of the founders for quite a while, but the previous organization I worked for, ESNet, became a support customer. And so I became, I think, the first customer of the company. And I shortly after became an advisor. There's a process for doing this in the UC. You have to go through that process of declaring a potential conflict of interest, filing some paperwork, but it's not difficult. I did it and it didn't take very long. And then I spent about a year, nights and weekends in sort of garage startup mode with the co-founders, just selling. And you're trying to make a profitable business, trying to get money into the company, put enough money in the bank so that you can feel comfortable leaving a nice, secure, wonderful job, which is what I eventually did. And that took just a lot of rejection, a lot of persistence, and then some, nuggets of good news that kept us going month after month. We did eventually get enough money in the bank to feel confident saying no to service contracts. It was a big moment in the company, and we pivoted towards being a products company. We first shipped a product about 2 years ago. It was very minimalist. It was the simplest possible version of Bro, but it had some things that big companies really needed. It went a lot faster than they could self-engineer Bro. It had a comprehensive API. It had really nice integrations with Splunk and with systems that they needed to collect the data. It just had features they needed. Above all, you could deploy it in minutes instead of months. You didn't need a Bro expert. So that was irresistible to some companies. And then I made the big decision to leave. And in doing that, I got advice from another UC person. He had since left, but Seth Rosen, who is a licensing associate at LBNL. And I was talking through the options that I had, and I was sort of pitching to him this half and half model where I would stay somehow connected with the lab and hedge my bets that way. And he introduced to me this idea of credible commitment, that if you're going to leave, you're going to leave. And it is actually quite difficult. If you're on faculty, this is not so true. You can take industrial leave, and that's what our chief scientist and co-founder, Vern Paxson, has done from the UC Berkeley faculty. But if you're on staff at some point, if it's going well, you need to give it your full-time commitment. And that was one of the hardest decisions I've made. I had 2 kids in private college at the time, took a big pay cut. I left the UC retirement system and joined the company. I got significant equity and I've had a blast doing it, but it was a little scary. And so after that, the bootstrapping phase continued, and I think we had about 10% of the Fortune 50. And when you have that kind of traction, it's not that hard to get investment. And so almost a year ago, we got serious about thinking about investment. We took investment and we began to grow a little bit more rapidly. So there's a whole story about how to find investment. Generally, it helps a whole lot if you're making money and if you have great customers and you can demonstrate that there's some degree of traction, it's easier to sell. So you need to create a competitive dynamic. I've been terrifically happy with our investors. The firm is Excel, which was, I think, early money into Facebook, a top-tier firm. But even more important is the specific investor. Do you have a rapport with that person? Do you trust them? Are they high integrity? Will they stick with you? All that needs to be tested. And so I would say on one level, maybe this looks like, oh, quick success, but on another, it was like Bro is 22 years old, and there's tremendous contributions from Berkeley Lab, from NSF, and all the parties that I mentioned, the founders who've worked, and all of us early in the company who've worked really hard to get it started. And it's still saturated in risk, right? I mean, it's not as safe as being a UC employee, but it's just a different kind of life experience. I've not regretted it at all. So I thought I would hear a few pointers if you're interested in taking the leap. I'm not suggesting that everyone does. The UC needs fantastic IT people, and I think I've tried to communicate what a rewarding path that is. But if you've got the itch, you might want to think about the following considerations early. And the key one is, are you solving a real problem? Are you providing value? It's really easy to deceive yourself in this regard and to think that people ought to pay for something that you've thought up. But in the real world, and especially in the cybersecurity space, I can't really speak to others, it's incredibly competitive. There's a lot of noise. There's many large companies trying to get the attention of the buyer, and you have to have something that makes a really qualitative difference in the lives of someone with the ability and the willingness to pay money for that. And so one thing we sometimes say, and we didn't invent this, it came from a customer, is that the data we provide makes threat investigation about 10 times faster and incident response. So there's sort of an order of magnitude improvement in the effectiveness of a team of people that's very hard to hire for, right at the center of sort of risk management for a big organization. A lot of those teams are still relying on legacy data sources or like flow data, or they're relying on proprietary data sources from older solutions, proprietary ones that don't scale very well. So we were pretty confident we had this, but it's easy to get it wrong. And I would say a person who invested in our company is really an experienced entrepreneur, and he's built now 2 companies that had exits above $1 billion. And he went to do his third, and he kind of got this wrong. He miscalculated, and I'm not sure he ended up with a single customer, though we had fantastic technology. Nothing is more common. Actually, the most common thing is bad technology with no customers, but sometimes great technology will find no customers, and it's sad, but that's why I recommend bootstrapping and having customers and that way you can prove, it's just an existence proof that the value is there. It's really critical to get these next 2 points right in a company early. So equity and intellectual property. Equity is about who owns the company, and IP is about what the company owns. And especially in the context of a UC startup, getting the IP question correct is very, very important. And there's lots of UC policies, regulations, there's IP agreements that employees sign. And so just to sum these up, you need to get good legal advice, and don't do anything that's too peculiar or unusual. Don't try to innovate in these areas, right? Don't try to innovate in setting up the corporate structures for the company. Just try to do what other startups are doing. That would be my advice. You can innovate elsewhere. And then you get to decide early on about mission, vision, and culture. What kind of company you want it to be. Do you want your company to be the kind of company you're reading about with serious internal cultural problems? Or do you want it to be kind of a beacon of what a company could and should be? And one thing I've decided for CoreLight is that we think of the company as a mission company, just as DOE and the UC think about their missions in service, education, and research. We have a mission to make the internet safer and reduce the chaos in the world. And even on the days when the seesaw is trending down, maybe we get some bad news, the mission elevates us, and the mission keeps us focused. And I really try to apply that filter when hiring people. If they respond to it, I know that they might be right for the company. And if they're completely coin operated, and sometimes people you need to hire will be, but it makes me think twice about whether they're the right people for an early stage startup. So you get to decide. And this is another thing that sounds like a truism, but the question of culture becomes very important as you go from, say, 8 to 30 people, because suddenly you've quadrupled the size of the company. Culture is no longer just what you say and do unconsciously. It's more about what practices you put in place and policies, and you have to think mindfully about how to create the culture that you want to live in. And then I have some pictures here, photo gallery, to just give an impressionistic sense of what this all feels like. And starting with a metaphor, I'm not a great swimmer, but I do like to swim. And I think you can sort of appreciate the difference between startup life and UC life by thinking about different ways there are to swim. This beautiful pool, this Julia Morgan pool, is in downtown Berkeley at the City Club. And it's a great place to swim. And you can see the swimmers there having a conversation and that's a fine way to swim. It used to be actually that when the RSF was closed at UC Berkeley, they would open this pool for recreational swimming at Berkeley, which is sort of amazing to believe. I don't think they do that anymore, but it would be filled with recreational swimmers actually wanting to swim this way. So it created a little chaos at the City Club. This pool is at Speaker Pool at UC Berkeley, and this is the way most people in UC swim, I think. You have swim lanes. You can become a really fast swimmer here. At Speaker, you might swim, if you're in the fast lanes, you might swim next to an Olympic swimmer who's swimming 2 or 3 times as fast as you are. And this is a perfectly great way to swim, and you can spend your whole life swimming this way. There's another way to swim that I've experimented with that I really like, which is open water swimming in the bay. And doing a startup is it's a lot more like open water swimming. But there is a connection with lap swimming. It's the same skills you develop. You might train for open water swimming in a lap pool, just as you could train for a startup by being innovative and trying to be very effective in a UC role. But in open water swimming is fundamentally different. Your visibility is lower. There's swells. If you're in the trough of a swell, you may not see where you need to go. And there's tides. And the tides are there regardless of what you want. The tides may be pulling in a direction you don't like, and it's not fair, but there it is. And they may shift suddenly. And in this kind of swimming, this is the Alcatraz swim I've done a couple times with one of my daughters. People will swim right over you. They won't. Maybe they'll mean to. Maybe they won't. But and there are literally sharks, right, in the bay. I don't think any of them have ever bitten an Alcatraz swimmer. I'm pretty sure. I choose to believe that's the case. But it's just a different context. It's fine to swim in any of these ways, but open water swimming is like startup life. I wanted to show you how small this is at the beginning. This is the first conference we ever attended. This is the National Labs IT Conference, Inlet. When we had a previous name before Corelight, we were called Broala, which is bro plus a koala. That just didn't seem like the right name for us. This was our marketing department and sales at the time. We had that one banner, we had one flyer, we had a little plastic thing to display them, and we had that sensor we're still selling. That was a fake version of it, just the case, and me. And I would go and show up and set all that up, and I would talk to people as they walked by, and I would try to make eye contact, and you would do that for 8 hours a day for a couple of days in a row. And I got some leads that way, and we sold some boxes. Then I would bring all that stuff home to this small office. This is at the International Computer Science Institute at ICSE. This isn't actually a garage. We didn't literally start in the garage. We started with donated space at ICSE, another critical institution in the history of Bro and early investor in the company, and a big booster. And we just had a couple of offices there. This is the way I hope I successfully blurred this out. This is the way we kept track of leads, and this is so garage startup-y. We had a whiteboard, and we had magnets, and we had 2 columns, Greg and Vince, 2 early employees, and each of us had some leads to manage. And then on one side we had evals, and on the other we had long-term prospects we wanted to manage. And we had little colored magnets, I think it was red, yellow, and blue. And we would just go to that and talk about the leads and go through them successfully several times a week. And that's how we kept on task. Now, of course, we've got Salesforce, we've got Pardot, we've got 4 or 5 major database marketing and sales tools and people that are paid to manage them. But it started out as simple as that. And it was fine. I mean, we were using that system when we got venture funding. So it was, you don't overcomplicate it. This is Vern, our chief scientist and eminent computer science researcher, one of the most cited cybersecurity researchers in the world, signing our Series A paperwork. This is what it looks like with Trader Joe's chocolate in the foreground. That really fueled us through all this process. This is the first RSA that we attended right after signing our Series A paperwork. Robin Summer, the CTO, co-founder, and the lead open source developer of Bro, who wrote more Bro code than anyone else in the foreground there, and Vince Stouffer from LBNL, setting up this really complicated backdrop. It was no longer just this roller that we lifted up, but it was illuminated, and it's like a IKEA project nightmare, and it takes an hour to set up. And who was doing it? We didn't have anyone was paid to do it. We did it. This is as we got a little bit bigger and we felt we were outgrowing the offices in Berkeley. And you can see new people coming on board. On the left is Alan, whose father made that diagram. There's Vince in the front. You can't see Sophia Posadas behind him doing business operations. Steve Smoot in the background, VP of Customer Success. He has a MIT and Berkeley PhD. Our sort of nascent sales team on the right, Diane and Steve Mallard, inside and outside sales respectively. And we were just working around that conference table, nothing too fancy. And pretty soon we outgrew it. Here's our new office in San Francisco. We moved to about 8 months ago. We're sponsoring open source meetups for Bro. This was the first San Francisco open source Bro meetup with Ashish Sharma from Berkeley Lab speaking, and on the right, Seth, our co-founder, speaking. So now we have quite a bit of space. It's uplifting, right? It's in Montgomery Street Bar, and we have an engineering office in Columbus as well. So, and planning to grow this year from about 30 to 80 people. We'll see, that'll depend a little bit, no, it'll depend fundamentally on how the sales go. But we have great ambitions this year to get bigger, and this space will soon be too small for us. So I just closed with this graph. This is what it's like. I'm really enjoying it. And I encourage you, get in touch with me if you are interested. I'm Greg at Corelight. I'm happy to answer questions now, but maybe you want to ask privately, and I'll try to make time, have a call, or just exchange email. I'd like to help if I can. And again, it's not simple, not easy, but highly rewarding. And I think I ended with 5 minutes for questions, and I'm happy to answer any if there are any. No questions. I'm capable of pausing a long time to embarrass people, but I won't do that here. Let's maybe wait a few seconds.
There's a question from the chat. Is that graph copyright or shareable?
It's probably copyright by The Economist. I'm trying to find the actual, we may re-implement it at Corelight. I asked Alan about that because we're trying to find it, and I want to frame it and put it on the wall in the company. So shoot me a note and I'll file that away and try to get you a re-implemented version that would be with a Creative Commons license or something like that. Yes.
What work are you doing with UC with your product?
Well, most customers don't want to share their status, but we do have a couple of UC customers right now. I think that that's the case even though we don't have a box specifically associated with the kind of 100 gig and soon 400 gig deployments that are common. We do have a box coming out soon, and I think it's fine for me to say this, quite soon focused on a little more directly on UC challenges. So I'd expect more universities to be interested in our product. Right now, it's mostly large enterprises with data centers, but we want to expand the user base. Yeah.
Is there a discount for educational institutions?
There is. The board is approved, and I've maintained educational pricing and just recognition of our heritage. It's sometimes the case that salespeople will quote list prices, and I hope everyone knows that it's important to ask for a discount. We try to remember to quote educational pricing. The pricing for the new box hasn't been developed yet because we're roughly certain what it should be, but we want to see what the performance delta is. But the value prop, I hate to say value prop, but I will say it. The value prop is that you could replace an existing cluster of Bro boxes with a single 1U box. And then for everyone who deploys our gear, the point is you can shift effort away from the shenanigans of managing a cluster of Bro sensors and towards higher value activities like data analysis and threat investigation. That's the idea. Many big companies are interested in that.
Did the fact that the product started as a UC product or idea help you bring on customers or staff?
That's a good question. I think customers were interested in the fact that it had been battle tested and deployed in operation, say at Berkeley Lab since the mid-90s. And I think that heritage gave them some confidence. In the end, they want results. They want a product that works, that does what we say it does, and they want a company that stands behind it. So I think all that's probably a little more important. It has helped recruit some UC people. But I think it's just the UC vibe of the company, the mission focus and the people already in it.
What were the lessons learned from the customer that bought your product?
Well, we've had a bunch of customers now. I can maybe think about a couple of lessons.
First customer.
Oh, the first customer, gosh, we didn't know. You know, one thing that we have now that we didn't have then is the notion of customer success. And so we thought that sort of the relationship, and we were like 5 or 6 people at the time, so delighted to make a sale. And we thought the relationship sort of ended when we shipped them the box and we got it working. But for a subscription business, and we're selling software subscriptions, that's when it really begins. You have to be constantly working with the customer to make sure you're providing value, you're meeting regularly. And we've started doing that a little belatedly, but it's part of what it means to bring experienced go-to-market people into the company, is to figure stuff like that out. There's so much we didn't know at the time that we've learned, but maybe that was one of the fundamental learnings.
What is the hardest position to fill as you grow beyond your initial couple of developers?
We've filled almost all the leadership positions, and the hardest so far has been the products leader, and it's in part because I'm picky, and I didn't really know what a products leader did 6 months ago or a year ago. But this is the person who is sort of the glue between sales, marketing, and engineering, and who really owns the vision for the products, or the sort of the Steve Jobs. That's one kind of products leader. There's many, and we need a person who combines some very rare. So it combines basically networking, cybersecurity, and cloud and virtualization products experience, and is visionary, but is not afraid to execute. And so getting people with that full stack of skills is tricky. And I think I've interviewed, maybe I already said this, about 60 people for that role. I just went out of my way last night and was up late interviewing another person in his territory in the South Bay. And so landing that job has been hard. We'll do it though.
Do you recommend using contract help, and if so, in what area?
We have used some of that, we've used it for inside sales. We've used it for design. We've used it for web design. We've used it in some sense legal services or contract, outsourced. In general, we've tried to, for accounting, I think the answer will vary at what stage you are. If you're really early, you're not going to have a general counsel. And then at later stages, you insource some of these skills. Yes. Tom wrote me a great note, which the term is sweat equity. In a sense, okay, great. Is that 5 minutes or 5 seconds? 5 minutes, okay. A really critical factor in our success is bringing people in who are willing to volunteer. And we sometimes say that's a try before you buy model. And the founders did it with me. And I think I had an audition that was like 8 months before they offered me the role. It's a big role to offer someone a CEO role who's never done it before. And I think for just about everyone I've brought in early, we tried to test the waters by bringing them into meetings. And we certainly did it with investors. We had investors on sales calls even. So avoiding the high risk, you push the button today, the person's on board, and you haven't really worked with them before, as much as possible is good. Although more and more we're doing that because that's the normal way to hire.
So Greg, I've got one question.
Sure.
So we've been really trying to ramp up the innovation engine out of our community. We've got 8 to 10 that are kind of moving along a path. Maybe they end up like you and CoreLight. Maybe they're a licensing agreement. And then I probably field between 15 and 25 conversations a year about someone within the system who's done something really successfully at one location. Maybe they've been able to scale it to 2 or 3 UCs. What's the best way that they can do their own kind of critique of themselves about whether they have something that might be more valuable than just, a shared service run by 1 or 2 UC campuses?
Yeah, that's a great question. It reminds me of sort of advice I'm giving to my daughter who's about to graduate from college, and like 40% of her class, she's going to Harvard, and 40% of the class is going into very sort of finance, consulting, careers where they never really get the chance to do what I'm advising her to do, which is to do informational interviews, get out there and talk to as many people as possible, make a lot of connections. Thanks. And I think because those are like valuable life skills to sort of look at an org chart, understand who does something, write them a nice note, say, I'd love to buy you coffee, and just understand how you got to where you are, and just teach me a little bit if you don't mind. Most people are delighted to have that kind of conversation. It's increasingly rare because folks apply for jobs differently differently. And I think the same advice applies if you've got an idea, the kernel of an idea for a startup. Get outside. If you think there's a market outside the UC system, talk to as many people as you possibly can. Don't be afraid. You talk to people. LinkedIn is a fantastic resource. Get into their offices, show them a demo if you can, and just watch their reactions. It's really easy to mistake, though, encouragement and kindness for a willingness to actually buy. So the best thing you can do is try to sell something. And if you can do that, you'll prove to yourself and to potential funders that there's something there beyond an idea that works within its institution of origin. And it just, just get out and do it, right? Just try to get outside and do it. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I'll disappear stage right. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. I really enjoyed it. Okay, great.
Okay, coming back on stage, Tom. Okay, Greg, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and coming and sharing. That was great. I mean, we, as I mentioned in my question, we've really been trying to get our people to think outside the box and think bigger about what they're working on, think beyond just keeping something up and running. And we have some incredible things. I mean, you've become in some ways, such a poster child for what's possible around when, community, kind of thinks innovatively about the possibilities. I love your stories about the validation aspect of what you've been doing. Okay. All right. So switching gears a little bit, go ahead and go forward one slide. We wanted to share, Matt Hall and I wanted to share just some updates at the ITLC level. Some of you may have heard about True North. The best way that I can describe True North in my own words is it's our version of a strategic plan. And here in the UC, we have a lot of autonomy across the campuses and the med centers. We're very distributed. We have, we work around the opt-in model, but as we've talked more at the CIO level, we all know that we have a lot more in common than we have differences at the end of the day. And we've tried to identify a set of areas, a set of focus areas where we can come together and identify where we should be going, realizing that how we get there and the pace at which we might get there could be different, and there might be early adopters and later adopters and those types of things. So go ahead and pop forward. So we identified 6 areas. I just want to cover them quickly, and then Matt's going to talk a little bit about some of the priorities that we've been talking about in a little bit more detail. First of all, it starts with really focusing on the people aspect. I mean, that's up there not because you're supposed to be there, but it's because we ultimately know that our community of 7,500 people is what makes everything possible and what puts us in a position to support the mission every day and to have interesting conversations about how we can enable the mission to live in different ways. And so whether it's around building our leadership pipeline or investing into future workforce strategies as our world continues to change, we're doing a lot there. Go forward. Financial sustainability, we have a role, whether it's in managing our own shops well and more cost effectively, or using IT enablement to drive and run the university more effectively. We have a role in the financial sustainability and how that ties back into the money that comes out of the wallets of our students and families across the United States and the world. Okay. Again, certainly we have a whole team that focuses on the teaching and learning mission and the innovation that goes on there, and the opportunity to not only look at what we do, but also the analytics, a huge big data play there. Go on. And the research mission, people may not know this, but collectively we do about $5 billion of sponsored research as the University of California. That's an amazing number, and if you look into the statistics, the top 20 are growing. Everyone else is losing dollars. So if we're not still at the top of our game and innovating on research, we're going to find ourselves losing dollars. So it's an important part, and technology plays a big role. Go ahead. One more. Public service, a lot of the focus this year is on web accessibility. We've always had a committee around it. We've really kind of spent some more energy on that. We found some funding for the accessibility issue, and a lot of innovation going on there, and a lot of great collaboration across sites. And then number 6 is, unfortunately, it's not all about opportunities, but we also have to manage risks in our role, and whether that's around cyber, which always gets top billing, but there's also a lot of risk around technology obsolescence and moving to new architectures. The cloud issue is an opportunity, but it comes with being very kind of diligent, looking at what it takes to get there and what the impact is, whether it's around technical, financial, and even how it impacts the workforce going forward, right? So these are the 6 areas that we're spending, that we kind of identified that we have opportunities to do more together. And I'm going to turn it over to Matt Hall, again, ITLC chair, and let him really talk about a couple of the priorities that are really front and center with the CIOs this year.
Tom, thanks a lot. Can someone give me a radio check here and make sure I'm coming through all right?
Coming through okay.
Right on. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, but in the start of it is labor number 1 priority. There's a lot of discussion that we want to share with you, but we don't have time to share it, so I'll give you a couple highlights. Our movement into the cloud, there's a great deal of movement in the cloud, and cloud motion also informs our labor force discussion. And finally, we want to talk a little bit about cybersecurity and some of those issues we face out of Isaac Straley's committee. So let me go ahead and share the screen, and then Tom, after I finish this real quick, we'll turn it back over to you. And just confirm that you guys see my screen. Someone give me a verbal confirmation, please.
We're good.
Okay, great. To discuss this last July, August, amongst the CIOs, and the 3 major cloud providers are Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. There are different ways of procuring their services. There's different ways of operating their services. Each of them are very distinct cultures. Amazon has the preponderance of our business in the UC. So on the 23rd of October, we brought Amazon, Microsoft, and Google meetings for the last part of the year. And I'm going to show you a couple of things from the Amazon deck, which I think you'll find interesting. The pace of innovation in the cloud from 2010 till 2016, that's the rate of new features that Amazon has put in their cloud environment and Amazon Web Services. So when you look at the totality of the services they have, they've grown 2,913 services. Now, why is that necessarily relevant to this conversation? The cloud into itself is fascinating. Santa Cruz, San Diego, Irvine, and many other organizations across the UC are looking at Amazon as a very important partner. Workloads are moving out of our data centers and into the cloud. So I think there's something we'd want you to consider when you look at the cloud is, what are the switching costs? Can you move a workload from cloud provider A to cloud provider B? So that poaching and opportunistic renegotiation of any outsourced vendor has to be considered, but also our labor force with 2,913 in Amazon, the new services that they have. How do we understand that? Going back to the labor force, Tom mentioned that 7,556 and $952 million in aggregate expense. I think the range is actually higher, as I discussed in last September's town hall, could be up to 9,000 people in a $1.1 billion expense run. So we're investing an extraordinary amount of time and money in our labor force, and you're facing a strategic change in the way we provide our services. They intersect in a new set of skills. So what I'm going to be introducing to the CIOs in Irvine starting tomorrow and the following day is, how do we examine the skill set required by our IT professionals? We've talked a lot about remote work strategies. We've talked a lot about just general labor force demographics, understanding the retirement demographics, understanding the various skills that we have in the organization across UC. Now the question is, how do we skate to the future? And we want to talk about the different types of skills that we have. There's some basic skills that every IT professional needs. And then there are discipline-specific skills. So we're going to be exploring these. Last year after the town hall meeting, what I did was I had a Slack channel up. Anybody want to join me in this dialogue? And I have 7 or 8 people, including the CIO of Merced and several people from around UC campuses and one from UC Health, that we're going to talk about these issues. And we're going to be part of, what skills do we need? What actual content can we curate? How can we take the things that are going on across the UCs and aggregate it across the entire UC system? There are amazing things happening all over the system. We need to capture the good educational opportunities, the seminars, the things that map to our skills, but what skills do we need to hone? What skills do we need to transition? And then how do we organize our work? Earlier today, several of you saw me with my mic open. Well, guess what? Basic remote work to work out, as I demonstrated in an error this morning. So how do we do that? That's the skills acquisition piece. And I'm running through this real fast. You can always get me at matthall@ucsb.edu for further discussion. But this is the context in what Tom's talking about. We have committee focuses. And the last major focus I want to talk about, and you'll see some of the committee members at the top, is our security awareness. So we have our security committee for ITLC. And one of the things we do is awareness. This is part of our labor force discussion. So right now, multi-factor authentication is going to be a major push for all of our CISOs. That's happening with a product called Zo. We are at UCSB, our microcosm of the world, where we're asking people to use authentication on their Google accounts. Multi-factor, UCLA just had a huge deployment of multi-factor, and it's happening across the system. CISOs have come together to talk about it. So talk to your CISO, get involved in the use of multi-factor, and get involved in the evangelism of multi-factor. The other thing we're doing that multi-factor defends against, I'm moving the screen around a little bit on you, is phishing. Business email compromise, the business email compromise is multi-factor authentication. So you're going to see phishing tests. Now, Sam Horowitz, my CISO at UCSB, has just done a simulated professionals on our campus. 21 of those 92 personnel in the IT professional space actually clicked on the phish. That's 22.83% failure rate. Now, I'm hanging my own laundry out here to say, look, these are smart folks. They've been through cybersecurity phishing campaigns, anti-phishing campaigns all over campus. There's a lot of discussion about identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and NIST CSF, yet still they were at 22.83% failure rate in that phishing. Now, we're going to get better. We're going to have conversations, but these things are coming across the system. Don't think you're immune. It's amazing the quality of the phish emails and how they're constructed. It can happen to any of us. Be on guard, and I think once this phishing test occurs in your area, you're going to have an exciting dialogue around it. And then vulnerability management is the final discussion that the security folks wanted me to talk about, risk management. And just an example here is we track vulnerabilities at UCSB. Here's what we're tracking. You see my cursor running along this. There's CVSS, critical severity vulnerability campus. And the discussion across the system is, how do we socially deal with these vulnerable machines on our network? There's sociological things we need to worry about in terms of getting faculty to take machines off the network, bumping machines off the network in an automated way. There's a lot of dialogue. So being in this space right here, you can tell the first thing is identify. And so we know what's vulnerable. Now, what do we do about it? So those are some of our major priorities. I know I'm running out of time here, Tom, so I want to kick it back to you. And hopefully that was a good sort of sampling of all the we have going on across the system.
All right, Kevin. Send the screen back over to us.
You got it.
Before I turn over the questions, just going to cover community real quick, right? So if you've heard me talk before, you've heard me talk really about 3 words that I like to use to talk about what we're trying to move the needle on: leadership, innovation, and collaboration through our community. Matt and I just talked for a few minutes about leadership. We had a great example and story about our innovation engine that we continue to build and strengthen across university. Just really, really quick. Good, Richard, good, that's slide. About our community, right? We spent a lot of energy trying to connect and build a fabric across our university here. Whether we're using a number of 7,500 or 9,000, we have a lot of people across the university who care about the mission of this university and come to work every day working very hard to make it happen. And we've evolved this, through, if you think there, the pie chart is the UC blog. I just call that the story of us. It's all of you. It started with us telling stories through the travels of me coming to visit your locations. It's now you telling your own stories to our community. And if you look at the chart, that represents the different mechanisms for our community to connect. And I'm going to point to the one that's on the fastest growth curve, Slack. Right? We're using Slack now. We've got statistics on it. That number right now actually is above 3,500. And just think of this. It's amazing to look at that growth, and yet we're still just, if we use Matt's 9,000 number, we're just above a third of our community connected in. So get out there and get the message to other people about connect in. Why are we only at 1,600 on the blog and 3,500 in Slack? Everyone who's on one should be on the other. We've got huge growth potential here. Not as much as Greg's business, but we got some pretty good growth potential. All right, move forward. Okay, and then last thing on the community, right? So if the blog is a story about us, then the Instagram is now the picture of us. And, we've opened up, we're always experimenting here on what we could do next, right? So it's a private account that we want you to follow. We won't follow your personal accounts back. And we want you to just kind of give us your photos. What's going on at work, where you're traveling to, where you've got a group of people together talking about the mission or making technology real for people. Get us some stuff, and we've got a contest where we'll get a prize to the next 5 people who submit pictures. We had some of the health CIOs up in Seattle a couple of weeks ago, and we're there. And then the portal, which we launched at UCCSC last year, I want to point to one specific area and make a call out to the community. We have a section in there called events, and it's not just meant for system-wide events, it's meant for everyone's events. So whether it's you got a town hall at your location, let's get it on there. You got a meeting of different groups, let's get it on there, right? Let's get on, the EDUCAUSE conference, let's get on UCCSC. HIMSS is coming up in the healthcare community. Let's get our events on there so that people can figure out where they can connect into. I saw something on Slack that's saying, hey, there's this Wisdom 2.0 thing going on in San Francisco in a couple of months. Anyone know anything about it? It looks really interesting. That's what the community is there for. Okay, all right, move forward. All right, without further ado, we're going to kind of open it up for questions. Matt and I are going to do rapid fire. He's going to grab one, I'm going to grab one in terms of what we think are interesting questions. So Matt, I don't know if you're looking, but you want to grab the first one?
Yeah, let me come off mute. There were some reports that I was having bad audio quality as well. So here's a question for you, Tom. Tom, how do the ITLC focus areas and get communicated to the IT staff at the local level? I think that's a good question. You want to take that one, or you want me to take it?
Yeah. Let me get a real short answer, and then you grab back and maybe your perspective being a local CIO, right? So what I would love to see is that again, True North is about picking some focus areas that we as ITLC have adopted, and that we hold each CIO accountable to delivering the message at the local level to his or her staff. That would be my quick answer, Matt. What about you?
So, Rob, here's how I view it. It's the CIOs in each campus and the CIO health system are responsible for taking that to their campus. So within my little world of UCSB, we have a series of social environments, whether it's our research IT cohort, so we have an IT forum. There's different structures through which I participate, and I pass as many of these concepts on as possible. It's going to be very uneven. And so what Tom and I talked about was, let's put it in the context of these UCIT town halls so we can also bypass any local friction and get the message out to individuals. And I think the next thing we want to do is make these documents available via Slack, via OneDrive, via Google, wherever the storage is, Box, and have some dissemination vehicles where every individual who's interested can go to the core and read it and learn the content themselves. And one more thing on that. Local initiatives, we're trying to leverage Slack and get volunteer participants all across the UC like we were doing with the Labor Sustainability Initiative.
Volunteer community here is fantastic. And again, you self-select into the topic that's interesting for you, and we've just had some incredible step-up people, individuals, and groups who are just doing amazing things coming up. Actually, just on a call yesterday, the newest one we're going to launch is one for PMOs. A community of PMOs across the UCs talking to each other about what it's like to run their PMOs and what's working. So,
and if you could repeat the question, Annalie Rugg from UCLA. For Slack outside of the UCIT community, is the UC license open to other communities to use?
So the question is the Slack license available for other communities outside of IT to use? The answer is absolutely yes. Give it to everyone and anyone. Let's get people using it. It's a collaboration platform for the masses.
I think there's some rows. Given a changing model of IT, will there be a focus on more training and security for IT professionals? I think the answer is your local mileage will vary based upon your institutional budgetary situation, but there's a broader component to me is in basic IT skills for IT professionals. We need to harmonize that there are a certain set of skills and abilities or certifications that we should sponsor for every IT pro. And then based upon discipline, there could be a SANS course that's specific to app dev people or something specific to cloud architects. You know, there's a specificity that's the next level, Brian, that we haven't looked into, but there's a certain core beyond just general awareness that every IT practitioner should have. And then there's discipline specific skills. So I think that curriculum is going to be what we look at. And then Tom, there's a second question from Anel at UCLA, if you want to take that on Slack or you want me to read it. And that second question is, I have dozens of possible uses of Slack. Oh, that she got it. I think that was what Yvonne just got. So we got it there.
The first one was, given the changing model of IT, will there be a focus on more training and security for IT professionals?
I think Matt's got that one. Yeah.
Can you talk about the strategic sourcing work you're doing?
Oh, well, that sounds like a plant question. So, again, this is about, we have a lot more in common than we have differences. We've come together, and again, there are people who've been around the system a long time, so, they can certainly comment about if we've ever tried something on this scale before. We've come together and really looked at several components of our IT infrastructure and put out RFPs that all 10 campuses and 5 health systems have been involved in crafting, scoring the responses, and then now we're going into negotiation. It's I'm gonna miss it, right? But I know we're doing server, storage, networking, and I'm forgetting. I think there's 5 in total. But what this is going to do is this is going to give us system-wide contracts negotiated, where we're really putting our full UC volumes out there to talk about. Give us the best deal. And if you know anything about vendors, and I come from the vendor world. They will pick us off one at a time, and what we'll find is that there's great variation in terms of what we've gotten from them. We'll get a really good deal if we buy with a large volume, and we'll get not so good a deal when we buy in small buckets. So, using our full strength is actually allowing us to, kind of really put our best foot forward and drive the best deal for all of us. We have a sourcing committee under the ITLC that is doing a great job of building the trust level and the fabric to be able to kind of do this and to kind of be able to get the right inputs into it. And then we've got great partnership with Tom Trappler and the team under procurement that is really partnering with us. And again, I'm hoping that this drives, I'm looking at some of the early results. It looks like we're going to get to discount levels that we've never seen before. And I'm hoping that we can land those contracts very, very soon and be able to start communicating them. I think we got to call it quits here because we're at the top of the hour. If there are more questions, get them into the hashtag town hall. Matt and I will try to give you some responses. Again, I want to thank our guest, Greg Bell, for coming and spending time and sharing a story with us today. This has been recorded, okay? I didn't see the top score, but we were, I think, around 240 or so. But there are literally thousands of people out there who should listen to this. So make sure you tell your colleagues that, hey, even if you couldn't make it, it's been recorded. Tell people about Slack. Tell people about the blog. Let's continue to build this community. There's a long way to go. Thank you for everything you do for the university. Let's do more, and look forward to talking to you in a couple months.